Okay, Rabbi, go ahead and start.
Okay, so we're finishing up the second chapter of Parkei, and then we're probably going to start the third chapter as well today. Okay. We left off with Rabbi Elazar, the greatest of the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Have shakud lilmod Torah, v'da mash tashiv alapakoros. V'da lifnei mi ata omel, v'nam hu ba'al malachta sheshalom lach sachar pulusacha. Rabbi Elazar said, be diligent in the study of Torah and know what to answer a heretic. Know before whom you toil and know that your employer can be relied upon to pay you the wage of your labor. This parable will be repeated. Know that your employer can be relied to pay your wage of your labor. Parable of God being a faithful to fulfill his promises. This will be repeated in Parkei Avos. So being diligent in the study of Torah. Diligence means, of course, not just quantity, but also quality. One must delve into the Torah with clarity. If a person could not concentrate on a Gemara, for example, correctly, so it's better they just, at that time, just read verses from Scripture. They should just study Tanakh instead. You can't go halfway. I said in the previous class, Tanakh gets a reward even if you don't understand it, but the oral Torah requires you to fully understand it in order to get reward for it. Now, of course, a non-halachic section of the oral Torah, such as a medrash, is open to many possible interpretations. So any one of the correct potential interpretations is considered learning Torah. With the study of halacha, however, if you don't understand what the halacha is by the time you finish that Gemara, so you haven't fully learned that Gemara. So if you're just having a bad moment, maybe you're low on food or something, and you just can't concentrate, whatever the case may be. So it would behoove one to try to improve their situations so they can concentrate better. Maybe go to a more quiet room, eat something, whatever the case may be. If they can't, go to something with guaranteed reward, the Scripture, even if you can't concentrate. So be diligent in the study of Torah. And of course, quantity is also implicit. Know what to answer a heretic. A heretic wants to change the Torah so they don't feel an obligation towards it. If everyone else is a good person and they are keeping the Torah and respecting the Torah, and that's they're a good person, but they don't keep the Torah. So then, even if they're a good person, they may start to, God forbid, attack the Torah. If they're a really good person, they would give the Torah a chance. But some people don't want to. They're afraid of religion. Of course, with so many perverted religions, out there, there's like 1,000 religions nowadays, and most of them are small. There's just a few large religions, but still, for example, even in Christianity, there's over 100 denominations. So it could be confusing to people, and some people had very bad experiences with religion, but that doesn't change a truth. If a truth is a truth, it should be understood objectively. If a person has no clue what is right, what is wrong, they shouldn't do worse than Jethro. Yisro he had a portion of the Torah was named after him because, to his credit, he studied everything, even the bad stuff, until he found the good stuff. And then he when he found the good stuff, he kept it. He didn't say, "Oh, it's different from what I know or what is convenient for me," and then so therefore I don't want to uphold it, or God forbid, someone would take an opposite view of the Torah. So that's going to be in later on in the Mishnah. It's called apikorsis, the opposite of the Torah. And God is faithful to fulfill His word. It's just imagine that. What if for a moment you consider you came to a world just like ours, only every single good thing in life someone would have to pay for before they could get it, right? So a person who has a beautiful home, of course, they would have to pay for the beautiful home. But let's say somebody has a family that they love. What if they had to buy each family member? They have a nice neighborhood to live in. What if they had to buy that? They have good friends they could trust. What if they had to buy that? They have, a nice free online Torah class. What if they had to buy that? I'm not. This is not a sales pitch. I'm just giving a thing. Okay, so if you just look at all of the blessings in your life, and what if you had to buy every aspect of joy in your life? For example, you love to eat certain foods, and God gave you enough health, oral hygiene, health, whatever it is, to be able to get that stuff into your tummy. So that's also an aspect of a blessing. So that's what if you had to pay for that? You just look at it that way, and you realize God just gave you like $1 million credit. Even a poor person has so many things in their life they're grateful for, if they look at it as something they're grateful for. Of course, if somebody's starving, that can override so many blessings, and they can't concentrate even on the blessings. But if a person counted their blessings, and then if they imagine, what if I had to pray for it, work for it, pay for it, and what if God didn't give it to me on loan, assuming that I'll prove that I'm worthy of it later on? So really, everyone has benefited from God's generosity. He could have put us all in a giant steel gray room. The entire world could just be this metallic gray box with no fresh breeze. Instead, God gave us so many beautiful things in the world. Of course, if people are having trouble, they can't always focus on the good. But imagine never having an alternative to focus on. What if there was no good whatsoever because you simply didn't earn enough credits to buy it? Oh, you want sunrises and sunsets? What are your credit? What's your credit? How many credits have you earned? Do you want to buy that, or would you rather buy mink stole, whatever the thing may be? Everybody has things that they like in life. So if we just look at it that way and realize, maybe more than the things I want to purchase, God has already rewarded me just as a credit so I could focus on being a good person. God has already put that in my life. So I owe God, and I want to deserve the future reward that He wants to give me. So I certainly want to do good and make up to Him in any way I can, because what's obvious from our situation, if we're not overwhelmed with pain, is that God is blessing us more than we are working for it. Now, what if we actually worked for it, spiritually speaking? What if we actually did hard spiritual work? That means obviously the next world would be pretty sweet. But it also means that certainly we would have a feeling of satisfaction in our lives, that we're giving back to God a portion of the wonderful things He's given us already. Okay, any questions? Okay, next Mishnah, Rabbi Tarfon. So, well, just one more thing I wanted to mention. See, Rabbi Elazar's Mishnah, basically it sets up the concept of gratitude, because Rabbi Elazar was blessed. Certain aspects of wisdom came naturally to him. You know, he was just an intellectual giant, and he had some of the greatest scholars in world history as his classmates, and he kind of dwarfed them in certain respects. So that's rather amazing. So it's understandable that the codification of what he would say would be something along the lines of gratitude. And this reminds me, I actually wanted to quote from Avos Rabbi Nassim. If anyone should happen to have the Art Scroll edition like me, that would be on page. What was that page? Just a moment, find the page.
I know this Mishnah's on 315.
Ooh, pretty good, pretty good. So you've got the text as well.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so if you got the text, could I ask you to read the English? Let me read the Hebrew and you read the English. On page 315. Okay, so Rabbi Elazar Omer have a shakud l'motar v'da ma shetashiv lapikoros v'davar echad Torah al tishakheho mimecha da lifnei me ata amel umi hu bal malachtecha bal barisecha v'naman hu bal barisecha shesham lecha sachar pulasecha. Okay, can you translate that?
Okay. Rabbi Elazar says, be diligent in the study of Torah, know what to answer a heretic, and do not allow one word of Torah to be forgotten from you. Know before whom you toil, who it is that has made a covenant with you, and he who has made a covenant with you can be trusted to pay you the wage of your labor.
Yeah, so when I saw this, I really wanted to mention this in class. Thank God Hashem reminded me right before I went to the next mission. You see, so when we read in Avos Rabbi Nassim, what we're looking at is a more, my impression is it's a more original text. And what we have in Parkei Avos is the edited version to make it simpler to memorize. Because that was Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's goal. Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, he who edited the Mishnah, he wanted to have a text that everyone can memorize because it was oral Torah. He didn't want it to become a written Torah. He wanted it to remain an oral Torah. So he kind of like abbreviated all the Talmud and the Gemaras into a small text to memorize as like a rhyme to help you remember all the Gemaras by heart. Now back then, of course, they were great scholars, and they can memorize an encyclopedia. and just the rhyme that we call Mishnah was enough to remind them of every Gemara. I mean, brilliant scholarship, brilliant intellectual capacity. The brain functioning is very high. What we see in Avos Rabbi Nosson is the original notes in some cases, and then what we see in Parkei Avos is Rabbi Yehuda's edited version, just to make it easier to remember. So this is very profound. Let's look at what the differences here. Okay, so the first part is very similar, except for one word. Rabbi Elazar said, "Be diligent in the study of Torah to know what to answer a heretic, and do not allow one word of Torah to be forgotten from you." So, except for and do not allow one word of Torah to be forgotten from you. So this has more than one meaning, but implicit is that if a person hears people saying heresy against the Torah and they don't say anything, and they do nothing to make it up to God later, So, God forbid, we don't want a punishment that the Torah we learn should be forgotten. But it's like if you're in a position to defend the Torah, and then some heretic is perverting Torah to, God forbid, try to make God's word, God forbid, forgotten from the world. So that's why it's so important to speak up against the heretic. If you do, you'll have a special segula, a special spiritual aid to avoid forgetfulness, especially of Torah. Then know before whom you toil. Who is it that has made a covenant with you? And let's look again at Parkei Avos. Know before whom you toil, and know that your employer can be relied on to pay the wages of labor. Okay, so the phrase and he who has made a covenant with you. Okay, that phrase is not in Parkei Avos. Well, in a time when we're creating a rhyme, Rabbi Yehuda was creating a rhyme to help Torah scholars remember the Torah. So there's no need to mention the obvious implication. Obviously, it's any Ben Brees, any member of the covenant. But there's more than one people with the covenant. There is, of course, the covenant at Sinai, the Sinaitic covenant, and of course the Rainbow Covenant, the covenant from Noah. So both of them are covenants. There was a third covenant, actually, that a lot of people don't talk about, but of course it says explicitly in Genesis the covenant between the parts with Abraham. In that covenant, it was kind of like a learner's permit to become Jewish. And let me just digress and explain how the covenant between the parts was a bris bein habasarim in Hebrew, was a learner's permit. We find that when someone's converting to Judaism nowadays, they're told, don't observe the Sabbath completely. Do something, at least one action that you know is forbidden every Sabbath until you complete the conversion process. So the most common custom by people converting nowadays in recent years is simply to turn on an electrical lights on and off, or on or off, intentionally, just to prove that they're not yet fully under the Sinaitic covenant. But we see the Medrash that says Avram Avinu observed the entire Torah. Also Yitzchak, also Yaakov. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob kept the entire Torah. But according to our practice nowadays, that would be something wrong if it's a regular situation. But it wasn't. It was covenant between the parts. according to Vilna Gaon, a member of the covenant between the parts had the classification of a ger toshav. Very interesting. Ger toshav normally requires a beis din in Israel to accept them. So that's a ben noach who accepts to keep, at least externally, the mitzvahs of the Torah in order to fulfill the verse, Torah chasiheh lechem lager v'lamizrach haaretz. One law you should have for yourselves and for the native and the stranger to the land. So to fulfill that, everyone has to have a public policy that everyone follows. To enable that, obviously, it has to be legal to keep the public policy, right? So if everyone is supposed to keep the Sabbath, it cannot be illegal for them to not turn on and off a light, right? See, in other words, there's a leeway there. And that existed for Avram, from the time of Avraham until Mount Sinai as a special divine dispensation. That was incidentally from the covenant between the parts. Fascinating. Nowadays, we require a beis din of rabbis, rabbinical court, to witness a ben noach's personal pledge to keep the law. But Abraham had shown such a diligence, exuberance, every possible thing you could show, that he was committed to keeping as much of the Torah as he could, and he would love more mitzvahs if possible. And in fact, he was the first person after Noach to be given an extra mitzvah, the circumcision. So it's just fascinating. And here, Rabbi Elazar says, know before whom you toil, who it is that has made a covenant with you. And that he who has made a covenant with you can be trusted to pay you the wage of your labor. So this covenant is not based on what we do or don't do. It's based on the categories that we're in. If we say, I want to be a Jew or I want to be a ben noach, and we do what it takes to do that, incidentally, even if we didn't declare, I want this and this and this of that and that and that covenant, it incidentally or is already covered. So it's just part and parcel. And by mentioning the phrase covenant, Rabbi Elazar, I think, is trying to help everyone, whether Jew or Gentile, to focus on this message. So here to me is an implication that Parkei Avos was intended, at least by the sages themselves, to be not only for Jewish people, right? I mean, obviously, when Mashiach comes, many will learn from it, but it's very interesting. And now, is that an implication that Rabbi Yehuda was not trying to create the Mishnah for Bnei Noach? Well, the Mishnah is designed to preserve the Talmud so that people can remember that the Gemara without forgetting it, without having to write it down, without having to take notes. That was back then, that generation. Obviously, it became a written law in a sense, and it was written down at least. And then the Gemara was written down, the Medrash was written down. So whether or not Rabbi Yehuda intended the rhyme to be memorized by Bnei Noach is not really relevant. The fact is that the traditions from the prophets that apply to the Bnei Noach were preserved within the Talmud and the Talmudic literature. So it's important, at least the portions that apply to them, that there should be a free access of information from Talmudic literature to B'nai Noach. And here is a source that, at least according to Rabbi Elazar, one could say that he was also trying to speak to B'nai Noach as well. It's not a direct quote, but I think the implication speaks to me at least. Okay. Going back into Parkei Avos. Now again, the Parkei Avos, studying the Mishnah is very important, because since it helps you, it was kind of designed as a table of contents for the Talmud. It really sets you up to become a greater scholar in a faster amount of time, more efficiently of the Gemara later on, if you should later join the Daf Yomi daily study of the Talmud. So studying the Mishnah is very, very powerful. Parkei Avos, though, does not have Gemara. But like I said, we have quoted some Gemaras, like the Gemara in Shabbos, and we quoted the Brisa here in Avos Rabbi Nassim that also discuss these topics. And it's really some rich content here. Thank God. You know why? Because our employer is faithful to give us the reward for trying to learn his Torah. So that's why we've discovered all these wonderful things. Okay. Rabbi Tarfon Omer. Rabbi Tarfon says, Hayom Katzer v'malacha meruba v'polim etzelim v'sachar harbe v'balabayis lochei. The day is short, the task is abundant, the laborers are lazy, the reward is great, and the master of the house is insistent. Okay. There was one word I didn't describe in Rabbi Elazar. Sorry, the last Mishnah. The word apokoros means the one who is opposite of the Torah, which in English the word for that is heresy. But there is, let's see, where did I read? I think I read in the Art Scroll Parkei Avos that. Some say Apikoros comes from the word Epicurean, who was, the Greek philosopher who had his ways that were pretty far away from the Torah. So, it was into selfish Hinduism. Okay, now continuing with Rabbi Tarfon. So this part of the Mishnah I won't emphasize too much, just go over it briefly, then we'll go to his second statement in the other part of the Mishnah. So when you're growing in spirituality, it's not like a house of bricks that you could tell is it getting bigger or smaller. It's more like climbing a spiral staircase. Okay, so when you climb a spiral staircase, you come back to the same doorway after you were there before. If you don't pay attention to the floor number, So then you could get a little bit lost. Now, when you're studying, you're getting higher by reviewing. If you were to go on a staircase that goes all the way to the other side of the building, then all the way back, so by the time you got back to this part of the building, you could have already forgotten what you learned previously. But by reviewing and then adding new ground as well, you know, just like you take a right step and left step, right step, left step, learn, review, learn, review, learn, review. So therefore, you could come to a much higher level than if you didn't do that at all. I think it was there was a Rav from the Talmud. Forgot if it was Rav or Rava, but one of them said that he doesn't fully understand. He did not fully grasp a topic until he learned it 4 times. Now, of course, for his level, fully grasp may mean that he invented a variation of Rashi's commentary, you know. But for us, it may take 1 or 2 readings before we can even fully realize that we correctly translated it. It could take another couple of readings before we fully understand the commentary on it. So if a person only studied Torah once, they can't be sure they fully understood it as far as we're talking about the oral Torah. The written Torah, if a person studies it, they've acquired it, even if they don't understand it. But with the oral Torah, even if you studied it, even if you have an understanding, especially if you're learning halacha, the law, any misunderstanding can mitigate the reward for that. And by not reviewing and allowing an erroneous understanding of halacha to come in there, it becomes very risky. In Europe, they used to require that the rabbis learn a certain percentage of the Talmud before they would consider giving smicha. So like 500 pages, 1,000 pages, something like that, 1,500 pages, whatever the yeshiva did. And now your average Gemara may have just like 70 pages. So studying an entire volume of Gemara is impressive, and of course they do a siyum. They have a special celebratory reading and party for that. But in the old days, that wouldn't have been enough to become a rabbinical student, or at least be eligible to start taking tests as a rabbinical student. A person would have to understand a good portion of the Talmud and be able to make a landing, fully be able to read it, you know, without the dictionary, and be able to understand the halachic discussion precisely. And in some yeshivas, you know, again, we're talking about before World War II, some scholars would have to memorize an entire tractate of the Talmud for a test. So when we call it oral Torah, I mean, it's literal. For much of history, it's been oral even after it was written down. So there's really no room for complacency if you want to be a great scholar. The day is short, the task is abundant, the laborers are lazy, or nowadays we could say the laborers are distracted. And so many, Hashem created so many amazing advancements in the world. A person has to double down to pursue spirituality nowadays. But the reward is great, and the master of the house is insistent. You know, God said, yeah, there may be distractions in nowadays, but of all the souls that ever lived, I chose your soul to be in this generation that has those distractions. So, you know, that's why some places encourage people don't have cell phones, you know, some yeshivas, because if a person's going to say that the beauty of life is stronger than their ability to learn. So then when will they ever learn? But if we're trying to train somebody to get into learning, so that's why there are many yeshivas, they don't let people have cell phones, especially with the internet. Even if they did nothing non-kosher, just the potential distraction is potentially too much for a person to become a great scholar. And if you care about your students, you really want them to excel. You don't want them to settle for less. And again, every holy word that you put within you makes your soul and your being a greater than before, a more wonderful being than before. And it pleases our Father in heaven when we do that. So, we're talking here about as an employer, in a strict sense, but really, we need to please our Father in heaven, and we need to be grateful for the wonderful world He gave us. And the best way to be grateful is to allow our souls to blossom. And the best way for that, of course, is Torah and fulfilling the mitzvahs, actually doing it. Okay. Any questions before we start chapter 3? Chapter 3 of Parkei Avos. Akavi ben Mahalal el Omer, Yisakal b'shalosh devarim ve'en atav lidei avera. Da'aman basa l'anata holech lifnei mi ata asid litin din v'cheshbon. Ma'ayin basa mitipa serucha l'anata holech l'mekam acher rimam soleh. Lifnei mi ata asid litin din v'cheshbon lifnei malach malchem lachim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Do we have a volunteer reader? I like it when we can collaborate. So do we have another volunteer reader who is willing to translate Mishnah 1 of chapter 3?
Oh, I'll do it again. No problem there.
Okay.
All Israel has a share in the world to come, as is said, and your people are all righteous. Forever they shall inherit the land. They're the branch of my planting, the works of my hands, in which to take pride.
Yes, that's true. However, I did not read the Hebrew of that. The reason is because I want this class for everyone, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, to participate in it. I'm not trying to be egocentric for the Jewish people. Now, when you're teaching a Jew in Nazi Germany, you really want to mention that there's another world that you're not evil for trying to do good. You don't want people to forget it's good to be ethical, and just because you're being tortured for it doesn't mean you give up the ethics, right? So there's certain things that you really should say to certain Jews in certain situations, but it's not actually from this Mishnah. That's actually a quote from I believe this one was Sanhedrin. Is that Sanhedrin quote or the Makos quote?
Okay, that's just the, I guess
Right.
they introduce each chapter like that, I guess, in this Art Scroll interlinear translation. So you want number 1, obviously, where Akiva ben Mahalalel says, Consider Consider 3 things, and you will not come into the grip of sin. Know from where you came to where you are going, for whom you are destined to give an accounting and a reckoning. From where you came, from a drop that is putrid, to where you are going, to a place of dust, worms, and maggots, before whom you are destined to give accounting and a reckoning, before the King over kings of kings, the Holy One, blessed is He.
Okay. Was there any questions? Okay, any questions on that by anyone? Okay. So Akavia said, consider three things you'll not come into the grip of sin. Know where you came from, where you go to, and before whom you are destined to give judgment and accounting. And then he explains it. Where you came from a putrid drop, where you go to a place of dust and worms and maggots, and for whom you are destined to give judgment and accounting, where the king who reigns over kings, the Holy One, blessed is he. Now this is different from the first Mishnah of chapter 2. The first Mishnah of chapter 2 is how do you avoid sin in public? This one is how do you avoid sin in private? So in the first one, in chapter 2, Rabbi Yehuda's Mishnah, the first Mishnah of chapter 2, he discusses Tiferes lo min Adam, doing something which is splendorous for people. So splendorous and Tiferes refers to Torah in Kabbalah. So we're talking about something where someone's Torah status can be elevated from what he is doing, and therefore he doesn't want it to be degraded. So, for example, if someone is known as someone who helps the poor, so people will ask him for further mitzvahs in the future. If someone is known as someone who steals from people, people won't trust him, right? So, doing something which is pleasing to humans, it helps to safeguard you from sin in a public setting. Here we're discussing what if you're alone and you're relying solely on your belief in God to avoid temptation. Okay, so if a person is focused too much on the physical, so now this is the derech, the way of teaching of Rabbeinu Ovadia from Bartanura, the Rambam, Rabbeinu Yonah, and the Meiri all have this line of discussion of this Mishnah, more literally speaking, that if you're overcome with a urgent transgression in the you feel you have to do it, well, then look at this Mishnah and consider these things. So now, if you look at where you came from, right, you won't try to go to do anything arrogant. You don't have to be the king of the universe. God has already got that job, thank God. Because you came from a putrid drop. You can be humble. That's okay. For a putrid drop, you're doing pretty good. Where you go is to place dust, worms, and maggots. You don't have to be the most famous person who ever lived, the best sports player ever, the best musician ever. At the same time, you don't have to do that. Everyone, no matter how good they are at any secular thing, they all go and do the same thing. Only actually the great tzaddikim, we have examples where their bodies did not decompose. They had so much holiness, even without embalming. So that's pretty impressive. But we're talking about regular people. There's no need to be arrogant. It's not going to help you. There's no need to compete. It's not going to help you. So remember the Grecian model of humans becoming demigods. That if a human tried enough, they could transcend the limits of human life. And Rabbi Akavia is telling us, nope. And before whom you are destined to give judgment and accounting, before the king who reigns over kings, the Holy One, blessed is he. So now, of course, with the king who reigns over kings, the Holy One, blessed is he, there are exceptions to the rule. Yes, it is possible to transcend the physical limitations of this world For example, Elio Navi, Elijah the prophet never died. He went, and it says explicitly in the book of Kings, he went in a chariot to heaven. So, there are exceptions to the rules, and if a person doesn't like the idea of death, well, you could be spiritual enough and allow yourself to do that. But there's no great quest to steal a potion from some horrible beast that would turn you into stone if you don't do it. That doesn't work. You got to do it according to God's rules. You want to be above nature, have a superpower above nature, so you have to connect to the being who is beyond nature. Pursue spirituality.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
Is he saying to us to consider these three things as reflecting upon it? Is it to consider the three things: the putrid drop, and then where we're going, to the dust and the maggots, and then to give to be sure we know where we're going to be giving that we're going to be giving judgment and accounting for the things?
Right. So judgment accounting perhaps relates more to avoiding thoughts of idolatry or immorality.
Right.
God is in your head with you.
Yes.
So there's no benefit. There's only demerit by pursuing any of these. Do not be arrogant. Do not try to establish this world above and beyond the next, and do not do not ignore God, because He's watching you. And when we pursue spirituality, even if we have a test, that's great. So now, what happens if a person becomes rich? They have any whim that they want is now available to them. So this Mishnah becomes much more necessary because they're now closer to the Epicurean model of someone who can transcend human limitations. So now they have to humble themselves more. So ordinarily, I wouldn't advise people to name a building after themselves. No offense to the president, but I wouldn't have thought you could have someone who is, in some ways, I think Donald Trump is humble, and in some ways he's not. And the ways he's not could be linked to the fact that he has a few towers named after Trump. You see, the little arrogance there, or the foothold for arrogance, allows him to rationalize hurting people with his words. But he has a humble nature too. He doesn't use his paycheck. He gives it to the poor.
That's
He
right.
just accepts $1 each paycheck. And of course, the symbol that King Solomon spoke of in Proverbs, the symbol of a righteous person is, do they give to the poor? So, yeah, that's the amazing thing about. I mean, just as a historical figure, Donald Trump is like very unusual in more than one direction. You can learn several things from it. So I think his flaw comes from that. He didn't follow this Mishnah, and I think his merit comes from he did follow this Mishnah. I'll leave it to you as that. So, depending on how you plan to vote, I don't want to influence the election too much.
That's okay.
But,
That's your opinion, and that's mine too. I'm
Okay.
okay with it. I know him personally.
Oh, very good. Yeah, yeah, if you ever seen his interviews before he became president, it's I was always shocked because his persona is like to be a wrestler. Literally he was went to a wrestling rink once, and he actually has a very humble demeanor in some of these interviews he did previously. It's a fascinating person, historically speaking. But it's not yet history, so very interesting time. Um, so yeah, okay, now, okay, that's this Mishnah. Now I wanted to go to another Mishnah in a different tractate. Don't know if you have access to that, but Russell, maybe you could find. I don't know if it's hard to change the page. In the book of Adios. Adios is tractates. Now, right before Parkei Avos is Avodah Zarah, and right before Avodah Zarah is Adios. I don't expect you to find it. I just want to let you know I'm going to be quoting from Adios.
Okay.
The Adios is translated the testimonies. The Tanaim, the sages of the Mishnah, gave testimonies. This is like a affidavit. So this is like a very it's very respected halachically, this tractate Adios, because it's like you have these great sages, some of them worthy of being prophets, saying absolutely this has to be the halacha. Okay, so in Adios chapter 5, Mishnah 6, I'm just going to quote part of the Mishnah. And it's about Akavia ben Mahalel, just to give you a little background about this amazing person. Okay, so Akavia ben Mahalel Haid Arbadman, he testified to 4 different things. Amrulo, and they said to him, Akavia Chazor b'cha b'arba dvarim. Akavia, take back those 4 things that you said. Shayisa Omer, they used to say, "V'nasa av Basin the Israel," and we will make you the av Basin, the father of the Basin for Israel. They will put him at the top of the Sanhedrin if he will take away these 4 things that he testified to that are not the normative halacha in that generation at least. If you will have more normative halacha. And in other words, perhaps easier for the people to follow, and not strict. Therefore, then we'll make you the head of the Sanhedrin. Amar lahem, he said to them, "Mutav lihikare shota kol yamai, v'lo leasos shar achas rasha lifnei hamakom." Better that they should call me a fool all of my life, all my days, and I shouldn't be called one moment a wicked person before God. So that they should not say of me, Bishvil Sarara Chazarbo, for the sake of grandeur, he gave up on his position of halacha. So he rejected becoming a member of the Sanhedrin for ethical purposes, so he wouldn't have to change what he felt was the halacha just for secular advancement. Because the Sanhedrin back then was like the Senate, so it wasn't just a religious thing. So since it was prestigious and it wasn't just religious, so therefore it would be sacrilegious to give up your philosophy for the sake of a benefit. And so the story continues further, but I just want to mention this ethical stance of Akavia ben Mahalala. So when he tells us not how to avoid sin, it's really powerful, because this person I mean, it's hard to imagine. It's like being offered, we'll make you a justice on the Supreme Court without the Democrats torturing you. if you just change your mind on these four things. I mean,
Oh my.
even a Democrat would change his mind for that. Just ask Kavanaugh. I mean,
Uh-huh.
so he is ethical through and through. So I just wanted to mention these people that we're learning from in Parkei Avos. It's called Ethics of the Fathers because these were extremely ethical people. And of course, in the 20th century joke, who do you want me to kill? To get it done, right? But there's no sacrifice of ethics by Akavia ben Mahalava. It's beautiful. Okay. Continuing in the third chapter of Parkei Avos. Any questions before we continue?
Yes, I wanted to ask you something about this Mishnah, where it's talking about. Let me phrase it from the book. Where Teradon is saying, I'm sorry. Part of this is a test, Rabbi, to see if I can get my voice on the class. The other one is in that particular Mishnah that you were reading. There it is. Whence you came, and whither you go, and before whom you are to give justification and reckoning.
Right, yes.
Notice that the one is past tense, one is future tense. So we are saying that the line or the sin part, the sin, is the present tense.
Well, it depends on the situation. If past, present, or future, God is there. So there's no way to avoid supervision. God is Haya Hoveh V'Hiyeh. He was, he is, and he will be. So it's addressing corresponding to that. Now, I came up with a little darshan, also the people call that darshan. When you come up with a potential way of interpreting something, I came up with a little darshan on this myself. Not something that I read elsewhere, just something that occurred to me as I was reading it. So this is just a personal insight. I'm not sure objectively how good it is, but I just wanted to share it while we're on that, if Hashem so desires. Okay. So, on those three concepts from Akavia, that from where did you come? Okay, so now let's go to his answers. From where did you come? From a future drop. Okay, so for a person who has a certain type of sin, this is not just figurative, it could be more literal. So where did you come to do a sin? What mindset did you have to permit immorality to yourself? Because you called the holy seed a putrid drop.
Ooh.
Right? So you didn't care if a condom was used and the seed was thrown away. It was more convenient. And from where are you going? To a place of dust and worms. So where are you going? When you are about to do something that is not spiritual, that is secular, you are engaging in a temporary thing. You see, before you justified immorality. Well, this is not anyone here directly. I'm just figuratively speaking.
No, right. It's very.
And now you are going towards nothingness because there's nothing spiritual about it. Without spirituality, it doesn't exist in the next world. And God wants you to live forever. And God wants you to have joy forever. And what are you doing? You're engaging with worms and dust. Why? And before whom do you have to explain this?
To the King of Kings.
To the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed is He. The one who designed a world so intricate and filled with so much joys and pleasures. To this person who wants you to have more joy in the next world. And the Talmud says the reward of a mitzvah is over 600 times greater than the punishment for a sin. So, in other words, this is not a reward we're talking about in this world. So that means heaven is over 600 times more joyful than your best day on earth. So God wants to multiply. God wants to multiply any joy you've ever had experienced in your life hundreds of times over. And are you still pursuing dust and worms? Are you disregarding holy seed for the sake of a convenient concept? That's just
analogy.
yeah. So
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and you know,
That's a very powerful.
yeah. Now, you know,
Things.
thank God. Yeah, if it's good, it's because God inspired it, and if it's not, well, I'm here, so I think we all know where to address that one. But you know, the idea is that the idea is that God is wonderful and He wants to do good for us, and we just gotta let Him be good to us forever. And we're just trying to be in a program to enable that. Okay. So I'm not ready to call it a night yet. Can we continue with another Mishnah? Any questions before we do? Any questions before we continue with the next Mishnah? Okay, well, I just want to mention one more thing is that, you know, there is a belief in, you know, they mention it, I've heard it mentioned on, I think it was by a Catholic, that life begins at conception. And actually, from a Jewish perspective, life begins before that. It's very interesting. It's a debate. It's a debate if this only applies to the Mamlechas Kohanim. You know, the Kohanim among the Jews have extra rules. So it's a question: does this also apply to Bnei Noach as well? But there are those who say it does. So let me just, according to the Vilna Gaon, it certainly applies also to Bnei Noach. But as far as life begins actually in the scrotum, it doesn't begin at conception. However, the soul does not descend until there is conception. So we're talking about a different kind of life. We're talking about a human, a potential human in the image of God, but not yet with the human soul. Okay, so now if that's the case, why does, according to the more strict opinion, as mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, why is the wasting of seed considered, according to him, the worst possible sin? So if you look at people waiting in a bakery, okay, maybe there's a bakery with like 20 people waiting because they make the most scrumptious cakes or something, and they say take a number, and they take a number, and the child is holding the ticket for the mother, and then they're crumpling it, and pretty soon somehow it disappeared, and then the mother would not be happy. She was behind 10 people. She stood up for a half hour, and the child's explanation of a magical disappearance of the wait of the ticket to wait in line, reservation, it doesn't satisfy the mother at that point. So now imagine if 500,000 people were to, well, have tickets that they're going to be your child. And so that's essentially what life begins in the scrotum means. It's that there are untold an amount of souls
Right.
waiting in heaven to come to this world to do God's will.
Mm-hmm.
And they're asked, would you want to be the child of this person? And the Gemara says they're given a choice, and they say, okay, yeah, that seems like a good person, or but this person has this and this flaw, why would I want to be their child? Well, they will actually be the best possible parent for you because of this and this and this. Okay, yeah, so if it helps me to serve God better, sure. It's better to be with that righteous person who's very, very poor than to be with the arrogant person who would drive me to do evil when I grow up, definitely. So then, they wait in line, and then they realize that there's like half a million, 500 million. It depends, on the father how many cells they have in the scrotum, because it's fascinating. If you know about biology, there's different levels of potential cells, and each cell is unique. So we're talking about a unique number, a unique DNA code. It's the analogy is pretty good, I think. So it's just a question of, do you think aggravating 500,000, 500 million, however many number it is, do you think aggravating all those souls is good for you? So that's what happens with every flow of semen that's wasted. Millions or billions of souls are now upset. They didn't have a chance to even try to compete against millions of other souls to get born. And now they have to go back in back of the line looking for a different parent. Now, if a parent divorces their would-be parent, their would-be co-parent, that could also cause a realignment. If a child was destined to be born, he's destined to be born or he or she is destined to be born from the father and mother. So if one of them is out of the picture, so there's a new judgment. Does a child still want to go and get born to that parent without that wonderful other parent there? So it's a long process, and there's a lot of waiting in line for soul. So it's just, that's more of a,
I never heard that souls had a choice.
Uh,
I always heard that God chose the soul
I'm sorry.
to send the soul to who he chose.
Well, could you repeat that? It didn't come through all the way.
Oh, I never heard that analogy of that the soul chooses who they want to go to. I always thought it was that Hashem chooses the soul.
Right. Well,
That he was
it's kind of
the
like,
person that he was going to send the soul to.
right. Well, it's kind of like almost, except that God is completely Naaman, completely faithful. But an analogy could be compared to a used car that, and the analogy of used car salesman is not anywhere near faithful. So, but let's say as in the case of a used car, the salesman would ask you, what do you need it for? Do you need highway travel? Do you need city travel? Do you need it to be dependable or have more room? Do you need it to have low gas mileage? Or, so once you understand these questions, so these questions are asked, and then the salesman directs you to which car to look at first. So that's how God chooses. He first has the angels ask you, and then based on those decisions, then the
And he
choice.
chooses.
Yeah. So it's more interactive, and so later on, Parkei Avos when it says elsewhere it says, against your will you were born, right? So when it says against your will you were born, so then there's other aspects. For example, pain or the inability to remember all the beautiful Torah that you knew when you were still in heaven. So, and not being able to change yourself without parental help. These things, a soul really is not eager for. These are some of the things the soul is not eager for. So that's what it means, against the will. And when you let's say somebody buys a car and it turns out to be a lemon, right? So the car is called a lemon, even though before they bought it, they were excited about it, right? So God is very humble that he calls it against our will, because there's an aspect against our will. If it was truly for our will, it would be according to our will across the board. But our Father knows that we're not happy about some aspects of it, so therefore, it's in Parkei Avos it mentions it against your will. It's very humble. This Torah of Hashem is very humble. Okay. So now, Rabbi Chanina Sagana Kohanim, this is the second Mishnah, and we may continue later on Rabbi Hanani ben Tradon. Rabbi Hanani ben Tradon was one of the 10 martyrs that the Romans killed. He was the great sage who they wrapped in a Sefer Torah and burnt them both together. Of course, without anesthesia, but not just that, they actually coated him with a wet fleece to make sure that he was alive long enough to feel his
torture.
So for that Mishnah, that part of the Mishnah too, we're going to continue next time, but let's just do the brief intro to the Mishnah 2 of chapter 3. Rabbi Chanina Sagana Kohanim Omer, Habe mispalo bishlomo shel malchus shemale mara isher Israel chaim below. Translation, please. Please share with us the translation.
Okay. Rabbi Hanina, Deputy Chief of the Kohanim, says, one should pray for the welfare of the government, because it's not for people's fear of it. Each person would his fellow man swallow alive.
Okay. All right. So Rabbi Ovadia from Bartanora, Afilu shal umos ha'olam. Pray for the government, even from the nations of the world. And it doesn't say tzadike umos ha'olam. It says umos ha'olam, which means if a person found themselves being raised in behind the Iron Curtain, they would say for the government. So what is the ethical implication of that? Because if not for the fear of government, people would swallow themselves alive. And we're seeing an example of that in America. Certain cities, there's been riots, and that would be a norm. And if you heard about you studied the French Revolution, they did it for the sake of justice, and justice was sidelined for decades. So whenever there's upheaval of that magnitude, often it makes things worse, not better. So therefore, it's important to have a peaceful exchange of power. Okay, so this is an example that's occurring in our days that we see the problem if the government is not respected, and it's really amazing that anyone could think that would be a way to run a city. Like the mayor of Seattle, it was just mind-boggling to me. She chose a section of the city to let people unleash their frustrations on, and whoever happened to own a store there, they were tough luck on them. And of course, she was not offering city dollars to reimburse them. And they let a half square mile or something of the city get wasted or something. It's pretty. It's unbelievable how some of this is happening, but it's just the implications of this Mishnah coming to light. People would swallow each other alive. Some protesters hitting people if they were wearing a Trump T-shirt or hat. It's just I would have preferred, of course, my knowledge of this to be more theoretical and not to have witnessed this coming true in the same country I'm living in. But so this is, it's just another example where we see this is divine wisdom. It's not just something some people invented in the Middle Ages. This is very powerful. So therefore, it's okay to pray for a government you personally oppose. And I remember, even though I'm philosophically against many things Barack Obama did, I heard myself saying, he's my commander-in-chief, in defense of him, to somebody who is, speaking against him too much. Because in those days, now, of course, thank God, I don't have to show deference to him. He brought destruction to America, I think, in several ways. However, at the time, I thought it was vital that we respect whoever's in power. And if everyone was doing what I did, we wouldn't be having this problem now. And now it's like, is there going to be more violence or less violence if Trump wins, or more violence or less violence if Biden wins? Nobody really knows. Are they going to be permitted to do more violence if Biden wins, or are they going to calm down? Are they going to try to challenge Trump if he wins, or are they going to be more concerned he's going to unleash army because he doesn't have to worry about re-election? We don't know, but we do know is that fear of government would be effective to stop it. So therefore, without unduly threatening civilians, a clearer mandate from the National Guard or the army would be better if it was done in the right way. There was a failure, really, not just by the mayors, but also the governors of those states. By the constitutional system, the federal system depends on the governors calling the National Guard whenever there's such dramatic trouble, in order to preserve the nature of the state and keep the federal government out of its business. And these governors failed their own people as well, not just the mayors. They failed to protect the power of the state's government. So the city government has no respect, the state government has no respect. Consequently, the president has to do something about it, and if he doesn't, where is the respect against the government, towards the government, which would prevent people swallowing each other alive? So if they interpret it as they won so they could calm down, right? So there could theoretically be peace under Biden, but we know if they don't, there's no way there will be peace under Biden. It would just be a nightmare, and Kamala Harris is even weaker than him towards this idea. She talks about being a prosecutor, but only for people and things that picks and chooses what to be a prosecutor for. She's really not tough against this kind of a situation. Now, if she was running for election, forget it, the protesters could be in trouble because she doesn't want them to mess with her. When it depends on it. But right after, if God forbid, no offense to people wanting to vote for them, but if God forbid Biden and Harris get in, there's no stopping them, according to this Mishnah, unless they say, "Oh, we won, we got the people we wanted in office." But if they don't, so then it's 4 years of Gehenna, of hell.
That's right.
So, when in doubt, I would say if you don't know who to vote for just on this concept alone, I would go with the Republicans. With the president just having the virus, so people were thinking about, some of the news agencies were panicking. That he's like 90% more likely to, have problems, whatever. So, but
Not to worry.
Yeah, but thank God he's recovering nice. But if it came to vice presidents, so Vice President Pence is more stable than the president. And if it came to a Vice President Harris, she's less stable than Biden.
Hopefully.
So, okay, so, all right, sorry, my political
Isn't
views.
it Hashem's choice anyway?
Yes, to a certain extent, yes, but it's kind of like, God's choice with certain aspects still controlled by us. Certainly in the way we respond to an election.
Mm-hmm.
Taking the high road to listen to respect the results and consider the leader who comes out of that as the leader is important for either side to take. And so if you doubt the mail-in ballots, don't mail in a ballot. For example, in New York City here, there's early voting. So for the week preceding the election, people could go into certain polling places, like 20 different places in each borough, and votes a week in advance, or any of the days during the week in advance. So people don't have to rely on mail-in ballots here. So, it's just, I would like America to be positioned and the press to not interfere with the concept that we will accept the results that we get,
Right.
And I'm just worried if people don't accept it. And based on, this mission is, it's just amazing. It's powerful. Before before this year, how many people, you know, understood this Mishnah completely, like we do, as witnesses to this concept? Nobody would have thought. People could have said, "Oh, well, that's like that's like maybe in Kosovo, you know, you can't, or Serbia, you cannot have such wildness in America ever, right?" And guess what? So this is spiritual information from heaven, and we got to respect it. And kind of referring to the concepts here, and remember, Akavia ben Mahalel, Akavia gave up being of Sanhedrin, at least at first. You know, he didn't run to be the of Sanhedrin because of a principled stance, and that's pretty good. I mean, that's beautiful. He's living the Torah. Okay. All right. Thanks for learning with me.
Thanks for teaching us.
Well, some things are easier than others. Thank you. Thanks for being good students, and let's collaborate more often. I like it when it's not just me talking.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye. Be well. Have a great week.